Ah, summer is here. Time for video calls, eating lunch at your desk, and navigating office politics.
Wait, that's not what summer's for.
But my inbox is full.
Inbox schminbox. Life is short. Summer is for getting away. Bring on the beach, the national parks, the music festivals. We gotta get out of here.
This summer, get away from the monotony in the Hyundai you've always wanted. The Hyundai Getaway Sales Event is going on right now. You can get the hottest deals of the season on many of our award-winning Hyundai models, like the tech-filled Tucson, the spacious Palisade, or the super stylish Elantra. Ignore those meeting invites and get away with the peace of mind that comes with America's best warranty. But get going, because these deals won't last. Add more joy to your journey at the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event. Get 0% APR for 60 months or up to $7,500 total savings on the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Hurry into the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event. Offers end September 3rd. Call 562-314-4603 for details.
Welcome into the latest episode of the Show Before the Show podcast, the official podcast of minor league baseball. After many years of trying out new intros, I think I just settled on that. Hey, welcome into the latest episode. I feel like for the last 2 years, I've pretty consistently rolled with that. I think that's the one. Since 2015, we've been doing this podcast. I think now, nearly a decade later, I finally settled on an intro, Sam.
I need to write that down because there are times like last week when I'm introing the show and then I'm like, all right, let me just start. I'm like, shoot, how does Tyler do this every week? It's almost like I've been listening to this for 460
our very
some episodes.
Unprofessional regular host has never settled on a consistent intro to the Show Before the Show podcast.
No, I think you have. I think, hey, welcome in is like,
yeah, hey, welcome in.
Yeah, it always feels cozy and nice when you introduce it that way.
Okay, know? That's good. That's good. I also always say the latest episode, which not all of them can be the latest episode. At the time, they are the latest episode. But if you're on a road trip and you're listening to all these episodes, every single time we start a show, you listen to the latest episode. That's not accurate. That's not accurate at all.
I just assumed you were editing these in post afterwards every week and just saying, welcome to the July 29th episode of...
Welcome into the 441st episode of the Show Before the Show podcast. Yeah, no, it's funny. So as you noted on the show last week, welcome in, by the way, my name is Tyler Maughan. That's Sam Dykstra. It's just the two of us today, just the two of us, no Benjamin Hill, but we will hear from him in a little bit. I did Home Run Derby X in Fort Wayne last week. Incredible experience. The Fort Wayne Tin Caps crushed everything about it. We had so much fun. Congratulations to Nick Swisher and his Hoosier State Tenderloins. I really should say congratulations to Alex Hugo and her Hoosier State Tenderloins for winning Home Run Derby X edition number 1 in 2024, because Alex Hugo was the star. Nick Swisher was kind of the captain making his picks and, but Alex Hugo was the reason they won. She was incredible, especially in her semifinal round. But HRDX was fantastic. The thing is, though, I heard from a lot of people I was listening to the podcast, I was listening to you and Sam last week. And then I'm like, oh, right, people listen to this, which is something that I guess I should have more front of mind. But whenever I'm reminded of it, I'm like, oh, I can't just be a complete idiot the entire time. People do kind of rely on this for some sort of fun hour of their week, including MLB.com's own Mike Clare, who said one day, he was like, oh yeah, I was falling asleep listening to that last night. And I was like, that is the way to listen.
That feels like more pressure to me. People listening to this for entertainment, they keep coming back and I appreciate them for doing that. And
same.
And so that's just a stamp of approval for every,
right.
You call it idiocy. I call it being your true self every week. But when Mike Clare's like, yeah, I fall asleep listening to you.
Yeah.
That's
I know. That does feel like a lot of pressure.
And now I'm setting up your dreams for the night. And that's
and B, I'm always yelling or being loud or whatever. I feel like that's got to be challenging. You're drifting off into an eyes, listening to Sam talk about, something intelligent with prospects, or Ben's telling you a story about being on the road. And then I'm like, hey, what if I make a stupid joke? So anyone who's listening, trying to fall asleep right now, I apologize for the haunting slender man of minor league baseball who will be in your dreams.
Or alternatively, if you're somebody who's trying to stay awake and you're listening to the pod.
True.
to provide a
you're
little
welcome.
zip of energy, then
Then
here
you're
we are.
welcome.
We're happy
Exactly.
to provide.
Ironic that I would call myself the Slender Man because I have never been slender. So let's kick it off on this week's episode of the show before the show, wherever you found us. Thanks for tuning in. You can get in touch with us, podcast at milb.com. We've gotten a couple emails in there as of the last week or so. Continue to, send along your thoughts, your questions, your comments, your inquiries about the world of minor league baseball. And we are past a big day, a big week, a big, like, I don't know. How long did you spend on re-ranks? A big chapter of Sam's life. As
If
the
you want to be
re-ranks are
technical
here.
about it, months.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That is true.
Yeah. It's not like we're doing nothing for months and just like at the
you just
beginning
like
of August,
roll them
like,
out
oh,
in
no,
April, and then
this.
you're like, we got to re-rank everybody. But all of the re-ranks are here. Top 100 prospects, organizational top 30 lists. You heard from a member of the Atlanta top 30 last week on the Show Before the Show podcast. Re-ranks are here. We're going to discuss those. We will hear from Benjamin Hill coming up here in just a little bit. Ben, of course, on his last road trip, went through North Carolina, stopped in Durham, home to our fourth and final. Is that Jim Small behind you? I think it is. Go yell out the door that I say hi to Jim Small. Sam's in one of the smaller rooms today because Ben's not with him, and I just saw a friendly face, the president of the World Baseball Classic, walk by. I'm pretty sure that was him. So we're going to talk about Ben's visit. Well, we're not going to talk about Ben's visit. Ben will talk with Mike Birling, the longtime legend with the Durham Bulls. We'll hear from him here in a little bit. We'll hear from Josh Jackson with Ghosts of the Minors. And yeah, we got a lot coming up for you on this week's episode of the Show Before the Show. And we are going to kick it off with re-rank season now in the books. The mid-season prospect re-ranks are here. A lot of changes, top 100 and top 30. One constant, that is Jackson Holliday, who continues in his spot as the number one prospect in all of baseball. However, Jackson Holliday, now up at the big league level, he is headed toward a graduation not super far away. Junior Caminero, also up at the big league level, and is the number two prospect in baseball. So right now, it kind of feels like the seat is being warmed for Dylan Cruz, the Washington Nationals prospect, who is number 3 overall. But behind him, we've got some younger guys. Walker Jenkins with the Minnesota Twins is number 4. He's at the high A level. Carson Williams, the Rays prospect, the shortstop, is at Double-A. He is 6th ranked. A couple of Tigers prospects in the top 10, and Max Clark and Jackson Jobe at high A and Double-A. So there's, guys are moving around. We've got some 2024 draft selections who have moved into the top 100 as well. And there is one interesting note at 12 and 13 that I will like to discuss with you as well. But Sam, your overarching themes, was there anything thematically in the top 100 re-ranks where you saw like, oh, guys at this level seem to be really making climbs, or we're seeing a lot of shortstops who are moving up or down? Or was there anything that really stood out?
Yeah, I think one thing that stood out overall is that there aren't many pitchers on the list. I think there are only like 22, 23. I can get you the exact number here in a second. But it reflects on how, difficult it is to rank pitchers now, because guys are breaking down. Guys are, it's not as easy to get guys going 7, 8 innings. So the starting pitchers aren't as valuable. So then how do you weigh that against somebody who is a shortstop, or somebody who might even be a first baseman or a left fielder, somebody who's like down the defensive spectrum, but playing every day? It's really difficult to balance that. And then you look at like what the current pitching crop is, and, there's not really many standout pitchers as it goes right now. Our top 2 pitching prospects are Jackson Jobe at number 8, Noah Schultz at number 15. If you want to count Jack Caglione, and the Royals seem open to him being a two-way player, he's a better hitter than he is a pitcher. But if you want to count him, he's 18, and that's it. It's just 3 pitchers in the top 20, 2.5 really even. Paul Skeens is the exception. Like, you might look at Paul Skeens and being like, pitching is saved. Here's this guy who looks clearly like an ace, and he's going to lead the Pirates rotation for years, and he's going to be, the next coming of Nolan Ryan, or whatever comp you want to use. I wouldn't use Nolan Ryan, but anyway. But he's really the exception right now. I mean, Paul Skeens is a one-of-one type guy. If he was still on this list, he'd probably be first overall on the list, but that's because we know how he would handle the major leagues. Um, it's just fascinating to kind of see that, and then you send these lists out for feedback, and nobody's really pushing pitchers. It's not like, hey, you're overlooking pitching right now. It's just the way the game is. Now that being said, we just went through a trade deadline, in that if you are a pitcher, you can get a pretty hefty return because teams are having more difficulty developing their own pitching. So if you are a Yusei Kikuchi, who is just an arm, but has done pretty well for the Astros since the trade deadline, but at the time was an ERA in the high fours, and the Astros really need pitching, they're willing to pay through the nose to get it. And the Blue Jays get Jake Bloss right back, who's not on our top 100, but is number 3 in the Blue Jays system. So it's interesting balancing all that. There's not a ton of pitching, but the pitching that does exist is more valuable at the major league level. It's just a fascinating time on that side. But then you look at overall teams in like the top 10, like you say, Tyler, it's a lot of really good infielders. Um, Being on the dirt is pretty valuable in its own right. Would it be better if Jackson Holliday was a shortstop? Yes, but he's a second baseman because Gunnar Henderson, who was a number 1 overall prospect a few years ago, is a really good shortstop. So they're moving him over to second base. Would it be better if Junior Caminero was a second baseman and playing up the middle than a third baseman? Yes. But on the other hand, you look at his AAA power numbers, and I'm not talking just slugging percentage and homers here. I'm talking average exit velo, hard hit rate, 90th percentile exit velo. It's in line with what Gunnar Henderson and Bobby Witt Jr. are doing in the majors. Now it's against AAA pitching, not major league pitching, and Lord knows there's a major gulf between those places now. But yeah, Junior Caminero, it's easy plus power. He needs to do better than getting it on the ground more than 50% of the time. I think that's going to come, but a lot of reason for excitement among those infielders that do exist in the top 10 for sure.
There are some systems that have made some big climbs. We're talking individual guys, but also the farm system rankings are out. The Baltimore Orioles, who have had kind of a stranglehold on the top spot in the farm system rankings, they were the 2022 midseason number 1, 2023 preseason number 1, and midseason number 1. They were number 1 going into the 2024 season. They have dropped back, quote unquote, to number 3. The Tampa Bay Rays are your top overall system right now. They've got 4 prospects in the top 50. And I mean, what we have seen over the last, really 15 years now with the Rays is they're going to develop these guys. They're going to get them to the big leagues. They're going to be big time impact performers. But there have also been some other huge jumps for organizations. The Twins were the 15th ranked preseason system. They are now number 2. And they've got a host of guys in the top 100, including Walker Jenkins, who we mentioned. Then there's the Orioles, the Cleveland Guardians make a big jump. They were number 19 in the preseason rankings. They obviously get Travis Bazzana as number 1 in the draft, who is the number 13 overall prospect, but they make a big jump. The Boston Red Sox go from number 14 preseason to number 7 now in season. And the Seattle Mariners went from number 18. The Mariners have been kind of the back half of the middle tier or the upper half of the lower tier in system rankings for the last 2-3 years. They've got a top 10 system now. Colt Emerson, Cole Young, Lazaro Montes, Harry Ford, who, we're big fans of. They've got a lot of guys in that squad as well, or in that system as well, who could be big time contributors. What was the system that impressed you most with its growth from preseason to where we are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rays being at number 1 is not something I would have pegged, 3 weeks ago, maybe. With definitely pre-deadline. They did extremely well, as something we've talked about on this show at the deadline, of sending guys out, guys like Isaac Paredes, Randy Arozarena. Paredes didn't bring back necessarily a big prospect, although I do like Hunter Biggie. But brought back Christopher Morel. But then you look at that Mariners trade with Arozarena, getting Brody Hopkins, Aiden Smith, who are 2 guys now ranked in the top half of their system. You look at the Jason Adam trade with the Padres. They get back Dylan Lesko, who's a project. They're going to try to squeeze more control out of him, but former top 100 guy with a really good fastball and a plus changeup. Homer Bush Jr., who now they think is the best defensive outfielder in their system. Gregory Barrios, they got from the Brewers earlier in July, and they think he's the best defensive shortstop in their system, or some in the organization do, and that's crazy because Carson Williams is so good defensively at shortstop, and that's why he's on our top 10 along with his power and speed. I don't want to say they're crazy for having that belief. I think it's crazy that the Rays have somebody who's better defensively now than Carson Williams at the 6. And the Rays being number one now is in part because the Orioles have had so many graduations. They've done a really good job of that. Heston Kjerstad's no longer in this list. Colton Cowser's no longer on this list. On down the line, they traded Joey Ortiz in the preseason, for the Corbin Burns trade. So they've done a good job of either trading big names for other talent or getting them to the majors and graduating them. Now, I wish Heston Kjerstad was getting more major league playing time. He's been dealing with concussion issues. Kobe Mayo just got up. Jackson Holliday, as you mentioned, has been up for a while now and doing much better. Got 6 extra base hits in 13 games since coming back. 5 of them are homers. He's slugging .596. Not walking as much as he was at AAA, but I think that's going to come eventually. There's a reason why he's number one. He does a lot to carry weight and push them to number 3. But when he graduates on August 29th, we don't update the farm system rankings immediately, but you can probably safely bet that if he graduates, if Mayo stays up for the rest of the year and he graduates, the Orioles might not be in the top 10. And that's kind of crazy to think about given where they've been, but they were always building to having a World Series contender year in and year out. And that's where they are. That's the important part. You mentioned the Guardians jumping. I think that's really interesting. They've done a good job of internal development with guys like Jason Churio and Ralphie Velasquez. The Red Sox have done a really good job of that this year, I feel like. One of our biggest jumpers in the list is Christian Campbell, who was a pick that they took last year. After the 4th round, they used the pick that they got for losing Xander Bogaerts to the Padres, and they used that to take Campbell last year in 2023 out of Georgia Tech, somebody who didn't hit the ball in the air very much at all with the Yellow Jackets and has turned that around really well with the Red Sox. Last check, he was leading full season minor leaguers in OPS and also in the top 10 in average, OBP, and slugging. So he's another piece of that. What was considered the big 3 for the Red Sox with Marcelo Meyer, Kyle Teel, and Roman Anthony, and then they draft Braden Montgomery out of Texas A&M, who had an injury late in the season and didn't get to help contribute to their deep run into the postseason, but could be another 5-tool outfielder for them. I don't know. I think the Red Sox have a really solid foundation right now. You wish they were doing better at the major league level, but there are a lot of guys knocking on the door there for Boston, and that's reflected here in the farm system rankings.
Sam, one team who I need to ask you about because they have been a storyline, not for the greatest of reasons in 2024. The Chicago White Sox, there is some hope. They are at number 11 right now. They've got 4 guys in the top 100, led by Noah Schultz, Colson Montgomery, the shortstop prospect. Schultz is number 15. Montgomery is number 28. Left-handed pitcher Hagen Smith is number 32. And Edgar Cuero, the catcher, is number 63. Is there hope for the White Sox? I caution because, and we had this conversation a couple weeks ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago, we were talking about the White Sox and their system in one of those ways where it was like, oh, they're coming on. Like, this is going to be a fun and substantial window of contention for the White Sox. And the complete opposite has happened. And obviously we touched on some of those reasons, injuries at the big league level, guys, really just falling off a cliff in terms of production. Tim Anderson disappearing. Jose Abreu goes to Houston. He obviously is on the outside of his career looking back now. There has not been a lot to be excited about if you are a fan of the South Side baseball team in Chicago. Is there some hope there with the White Sox, at least in terms of the group that is there? Obviously, the work still has to be done to develop them in the proper way and get them succeeding at the major league level in the proper way. But it seems as though, the White Sox going into this season were number 20. They are now number 11. There's got to be something there for White Sox fans to hang on to.
Yeah, there is, right? Like Noah Schultz, I think, is really promising as a left-handed pitcher. Some folks are probably going to get Chris Sale vibes in one way or another. It's inevitable pitching in the White Sox system. He's 6'9". I interviewed him in Tennessee for a story that I'll be working on now that rerank is out on his pitch mix. And, he's got a really good sweeping slider. Fastball has good velocity. It's actually been pretty hittable, but he's got a workable changeup. Throws more in the zone than you'd expect for somebody that big and that young. So he's somebody who has impressed a lot of people, made significant gains in 2024. I really like the way they've turned around Edgar Caro. You might remember him from the Angels system. This time last year, Tyler, you and I were talking about this before we got on the call. The Angels get aggressive with their prospects, sending them to Double A, and he really struggled at the outset last year. It's in the Southern League with that transition being much younger than the league average. Then they acquire him this year. He's been back at Double A, been pretty good, and then he got the move to AAA and has kept the momentum going. So I think there's a potential catcher of the future. There's a potential at least mid-rotation starter in Noah Schultz. Colson Montgomery hasn't had the best year at AAA, but he's still only 22 years old. The power is still there. I'm not overly concerned. I think a lot of people thought he was going to debut this year. That might not happen, but if he debuts in his age 23 season, that's not the end of the world, certainly, for Colson Montgomery. I'm really fascinated to see what happens with Hagen Smith. They had the 5th overall pick. They get arguably the best college pitcher in this draft. Now, I know Chase Burns went 2 to the Reds. That was a little bit of a shock. Everybody thought the debate would be between, whichever Charlie Condon and Travis Bazzana dropped to 2, that's who the Reds would take. But they go with Chase Burns,
right?
Who on pitch alone had the vibes of Paul Skeens, but is not the same ceiling. I don't want to mix those two together, but there's some exciting stuff there with Chase Burns for sure, and a fiery nature too. I mean, the guy loves competing. It seems like somebody who's going to get the most out of his pitches. But Hagen Smith right there with him. I mean, 65 grade fastball, 65 grade slider, good splitter, throws left-handed, exceptional results this year at Arkansas. I think was a Golden Spikes finalist right there with Condon and Bazzana. So getting him in this mix, I mean, we could look up a year from now and he might be their top prospect if he keeps pitching in the minors the way he did in college. Below that, it's a little bit harder for me to find real excitement here. I mean, you talk about players or systems that really improved at the deadline. I think of the Rays, I think of the Marlins, I think of the Blue Jays. The White Sox, nobody in their top. I'm trying to find the top guy that they traded for this year, and it's maybe Gerald Perez, of the Dodgers at number 14. I mean, there really isn't that big acquisition outside of the draft that they've made in the last few months. And you would think this would be a team that would be selling off whatever it could. Luis Robert trade didn't happen. Eloy Jimenez was a sell-off to the Orioles. Garrett Crochet, that trade didn't materialize when everybody thought that would have been the trade that I think could have really put them at least into the top 10 here of our farm system rankings, if not higher than that. Certainly within the top 10, maybe top 7, had they pulled off a Garrett Crochet trade with some of the prices that were going around. That didn't happen. So, yes, is there hope? It's better than being ranked 20th, where they were at the beginning of the season.
Right.
Is this an Orioles situation? We're going to be listen, we know we're bad at the major league level now, but it's coming. Some stuff's coming. Some good players are coming. Not enough for me to say oh, give it time, White Sox fans. 2 years from now, you'll be right there with the Twins and the Guardians for the best in the AL Central. More is going to have to happen here for the White Sox. But I do like Schultz. I like Montgomery. Like I said about Smith, I could see him having a big first full year and us talking about him as a bigger brand than he already is. But I would have liked to see the White Sox even better than this, considering what's happening at the top level.
One last point about where things sit after the re-ranks that I wanted to ask about, and it doesn't necessarily even really tell us that much because it's kind of a coin flip of where these guys are. But as far as 2024 draft picks go, Charlie Condon is the highest ranked in the top 100. The slugger from Georgia, 12th ranked overall. He went to the Rockies at 3rd overall this year in the draft. He's only played 7 minor league games so far. He does have his first professional home run. He is 1 spot ahead of Travis Bazzana, who was 1st overall. And, a second ago, you mentioned the fact that Chase Burns is kind of a different case right now, and he's down at number 24. But what gave the edge to Charlie Condon over Travis Bazzana? And is it surprising to you that we've had a draft class that really was I would say deep in talent, but not necessarily the highest upper echelon talent that we've seen in recent years, but none of those guys are in the top 10.
Yeah. It was interesting, the debate between Condon and Bazzana, and I'll get to your second point in a minute, but that one, our brother podcast is the MLB Pipeline podcast, and I encourage everybody to listen to that. In addition to this, obviously, because Jim and Jonathan and Jason have great conversations over there. Uh, Jim and Jonathan are completely split. They do our draft lists. They are completely split on who's the better prospect from this year's draft class. Jonathan put out a poll in the field. You might have read it, asking for who is the number one prospect. Bazana won that poll. And it was a pretty sizable poll. This was not like 5 people. This was pretty deep. So Bazana won that poll. Then you look at the year that Charlie Condon had, and clearly the best actual performer in college baseball this year. And he did it in the SEC in a year that the SEC was incredibly deep, making teams to Omaha and all that. For me, when I'm looking at it, because I don't do the draft rankings, I participate in our draft coverage. I do a lot, but those two are the kings of draft coverage. Those two do it, and it's very much a debate. So the idea of Bazana being number one on our draft list, but coming in number 2 when we do this, it's not a reflection of so much has changed. I think it's more a reflection of where the industry is on those two. When we sent out the top 100 for feedback, and we had it Condon slightly a bit ahead of Bazana, there were a lot of people who replied being like, you could have this in either order, and I'm not going to argue with you. I think that's the way it goes. I mean, it's so early.
I think that's what it really comes down to right now.
Right. If we could put these guys on tiers and just say like, hey, these guys are all pretty even right now.
Right.
We would do that. If we could put them both 12 and a half, I would do that in a heartbeat. It's not great to do that because people want opinions. My opinion, when I voted, I had Condon ahead of Bazana. The way I look at it, these are both bat first types, right? Like Bazana plays pretty well at second base, but is not a shortstop. Condon plays third base, maybe some left field. He's done both so far in the Rocky system. He's questionable on defense. Maybe he gets there eventually to be kind of like an average third baseman. So optimistically, we're looking at 2 guys on the dirt. Condon has a plus hit tool and plus power. It might even be more than that. I mean, he was setting records this year with how much power he was showing for Georgia. Bazana is a plus hit tool, above average power, just above average power, which I put in air quotes. It's 55 grade. It's above average. It's good. There's very little for me to complain about with how hard Travis Bazana hits the ball. But for me, if we're looking at somebody with a plus and a plus and somebody with a plus and above average, I'm going to lean towards Condon just for the impact. But it is very close. It's a debate we're going to have for a very long time. You're talking about nobody landing in the top 10. I think that is reflective of the draft class in general. If, let's say, JJ Weatherholt, right? He was somebody who the Guardians were seriously considering at number 1 overall, had some hamstring injuries, is a decent shortstop when healthy, might end up being a second baseman long-term, especially in the Cardinal system. But if he didn't have those hamstring injuries during the season, and some people were questioning about, long-term health when it comes to that, he would be like, you would want somebody at a premium position, somebody playing center field, catcher, or center field. This draft class didn't have that. So there's nobody really breaking through into the top 10 for me. Condon could be that guy, but he's not like, you compare him to Dylan Cruz from last year,
right?
Who, as you mentioned, is number 3 for us. Dylan Cruz plays a really good center field, is very fast. Plus he hits the ball hard, makes decent swing decisions, checks almost every box to being a 5-tool guy. Condon is not that right now. Not saying he can't improve that, get better at it. But you look at last year was just loaded up at the positions you would want to be loaded up at. Wyatt Langford, a really good outfielder, playing left field more now this year, but incredibly fast and hits for power. Max Clark, a no doubt center fielder, with plus speed and plus hit tool. Walker Jenkins, well-rounded outfielder in his own right, who's now at high A, like Max Clark. That last year's draft class just ticked every box you were looking for in terms of ceiling. This one, there's just too many questions around the edges for some of these guys. No, that's not saying there's no reason to be excited. We still rank them really high overall, which also speaks to how talent is kind of down in the minor leagues right now in general. But it just doesn't reach the heights of last year's class for sure.
All right, Sam, final real world point. If you had to rank me, you, Ben, and Josh in terms of our prospect status, what tiers are we on?
Ooh.
How much of a
bloody.
higher tier are we on than like Condon, Bazana, those guys?
Yeah, right. Of course. Yeah, yeah. Because you guys have been in the minors for a long time. We've all put in the work. These guys are just showing up, you know?
All the experience in the world, Sam.
Yeah, right. Somebody was asking me about this earlier. I was on Toronto radio earlier today, and they were asking, like, so how do you balance high upside with guys who have been around a while and shown it? And I'm like, I wish I had a magic formula because I would
Yeah,
plug it in.
exactly.
But also, I don't know if I want to plug your guys' ages into my magic formula for prospect status.
What does
Um,
that mean, Sam? Calling us old? I'm the second youngest member of this podcast, which makes me feel a little bit better.
yeah, if
We
we're
all
grouping you,
know Sam Dykstra, born in the 90s. We get it.
1990 exact. I missed it by four months. I guess 3 months and a few days. But listen, I think we're all on the same tier. I think we're all a tier here.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. A for absolutely not. We're not going anywhere. All right, Sam, final actual point for you. Is there anything else that, if you've got fans who are looking at the top 100s or the organizational, the farm system re-ranks, any other things that you think maybe are flying under the radar or a prospect that you were excited to see in the top 100 or a cool story that's in a top 30, something else that you would think like, oh yeah, if I was a baseball fan, I would want to know about that and I might miss it otherwise.
Ooh, that's a good one. The one I keep talking about is Christian Campbell. I mean, I really like him. He wasn't ranked in our Red Sox top 30 at the beginning of the year because he was lower draft status, and he had a couple of games with the Red Sox or in their system last year anyway. But when I showed up to spring, I don't do the Red Sox list. Jim Callis does. But when I showed up to spring and I was asking people around, like, who's impressed you guys so far? Who's going to pop off? They all said Campbell. They said Campbell. We think we've taught some stuff with him. Um, to work on the launch angle, and he's really taken well to it. He's hitting the ball hard and he's fast and all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, that's interesting. So eventually we got him on the Red Sox list at number 30. And I'm sure people were looking at that and scratching their heads. And that's why we do in-season re-rank. So for him to pop into the top 100, and he was right there with Teal, Anthony, and Meyer for like how they were performing at Double A. Now those guys are at Triple A Worcester. I'm not saying Campbell's going to end up the year there, but it's looking like he might have as high a ceiling. He just doesn't have the track record of those guys. But every passing week, he adds to that track record. So he's definitely somebody to watch. I could see him zooming up even more when we do the offseason lifts if this continues. There's still baseball to play. And that's the reason why we're ranking him where we are right now. As the Double A sample expands for Christian Campbell, maybe we see him come down a little bit to earth. But right now, guy's got a rocket strapped to his back. One other one I want to point out real quick is the San Diego Padres. I do that list. And, going through that list, it was honestly, I thought it would be tougher to rank guys for that group after the trades they made at the deadline.
Right.
AJ Preller staying incredibly aggressive, shipping out a lot of the farm to get in some relief arms and Jason Adam and Tanner Scott from the Marlins, and they already made the Luis Ariz trade earlier in the year. So you would think it would be empty, but I really like their draft class. There's not really a superstar necessarily in there, but like Kavares Tears, where they got after the fourth round, I think was a tremendous pick. He's now their number 6 prospect. Cash Mayfield and Boston Bateman. There's some lefty prep pitchers with some high upside, especially on the Mayfield profile. And then they're just loaded with these like super interesting relievers, like Bradley Rodriguez, who's somebody who will touch triple digits and throws an incredible changeup. He's already somebody who's reached Double A in that system at just 20 years old. Some of the conversations I've had are like, why don't they start this guy? And I think they just really like him as a reliever. Stick to that fastball changeup. He's got a decent slider too. But they've also done some really interesting work getting like Javian Sandridge, who's a 25-year-old left-hander who they talked about maybe bringing up at some point this year. He's got crazy good velocity and a good slider. Francis Pena was somebody they signed for only $10,000 out of the Dominican Republic in January 2022. He's now at AAA with a really good fastball and cutter. Omar Cruz, who's now their number 23 prospect. He's a 25-year-old left-hand reliever, but he was a minor league Rule 5 pick. He was somebody who was in the Padres system beginning in July 2017. Then he got moved to the Pirates in the Joe Musgrove deal. They got him back as a minor league pick. He's got a really good changeup. That's got him knocking on the door at AAA El Paso. The Padres, part of the reason why they're super aggressive, or AJ Preller specifically at the top is super aggressive is because it's bordering on arrogance. They are always supremely confident that they can rebuild their farm because they scout very well. They develop really well. Getting somebody like Ethan Salas and Leo Dallas DeVries, who they did not trade away in the last 2 international signing periods, that was good scouting over the years. And that was good on them for like being aggressive with those guys and doing what they needed to sign them. And now they're still in that system and at the top there. So whether they go out and find relievers, whether they develop this draft class that, like I said, is deeper than a lot of people think. Cobb Hightower, they're high on, whereas the industry wasn't really as a pick this year, coming out of, I believe it was North Carolina. They do a really good job of this. So if you look at the Padres and think, well, they're empty now, they are. But if we look up a year from now and some of these guys are really popped, I wouldn't be surprised either.
They also might have the best back-to-back prospect names in their system, and Cash with a K, Mayfield, and Boston Bateman were their number 3 and number 4, the 2 lefties that they got in the draft. All right, Sam, for all of your prospect re-rank coverage, you can head to MLB.com. MLB Pipeline is where you will find it all from Jim and Jonathan and Sam. And we are going to step aside. And when we return, we will hear from Benjamin Hill, who told us that the context for the interview this week was that the general manager of the Durham Bulls, Tyler Parsons, was saying to Ben, quote, "You got to do one of those baseball lifer interviews with Mike." That is Mike Birling, Bulls president. He's been here forever. And Mike didn't want to do it, saying he was too boring. And Ben said, nah, we should do the baseball lifer interview. So they did. And here is Mike Birling from the Durham Bulls, a baseball lifer.
When you're worried about underarm sweat and odor, it can be distracting. Like this. Or this. Or even this. It's time to silence those distractions with a spray of powerful Dove Men Plus Care Antiperspirant. Featuring our 72-hour protection and soothing 1/4 moisturizing cream. Because when you forget about your underarms, you can focus on being unforgettable. Dove Men. Forgettable underarms, unforgettable you.
We'll do the Mike Birling baseball lifer interview, the official interview of a long career in baseball. So you've been with the Durham Bulls for
26 years.
26 years. So that goes back to 1998.
Yeah. So the Durham Bulls became AAA of the Devil Rays at the time in '98. I got here in August of the first year of AAA from the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers.
Wow. So Timber Rattlers to Durham Bulls in this new ballpark.
Yeah, it was Appleton Foxes in 1994. We changed our name,
right, Appleton
moved
Foxes
into the new stadium, renamed ourselves the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers. Yeah. And then we had such a huge, successful first year. My boss, Steve Malliot, at the time, got a job with the Milwaukee Brewers, and then I got hired as GM at 23 years old, which I have a 23-year-old kid, and I'm like, how the heck did they put me in charge at 23 years old of a minor league baseball team?
Yeah.
Still wonder why they did that.
But it worked out.
It worked out. We had for me, I was from there, so to be general manager of your hometown team, there's nothing better than that. But when the Durham Bulls call, that's probably the only team that I probably would have left Wisconsin for, and to be able to come here. I came here as assistant GM at the end of the '98 season. So, and then never thought that I would be here 26 years later, but just love the city, love the Goodmans. They're such a great family to work for. I feel like I'm very loyal to them and what they've done to the community, and so it's been a special run.
Yeah. So on one hand, still AAA team, International League, still in this ballpark, still the same ownership group. But the industry's changed a lot in that time, despite all those constants. What has it been like from the late 90s all through the 2000s, 2010s, into the 2020s, going through the COVID season, the reorganization of minor league baseball? This question is way too much to actually really get into, yeah. But to break it down, what has it been like weathering the change in the industry over such a long period of time?
Yeah, and it definitely has. And For me personally, and what I try to have always talked to our staff about, it's the control the things you can control, and our job is to put together a product every single night. There's how many people come to this ballpark for the first time every single day? So our job is to focus on family entertainment. All the other stuff, sure, we have to deal with the ups and downs from, I can remember when we first became AAA, and then all of a sudden you go into 2008, when that whole thing happened, trying to figure out how to get fans when most people are losing their jobs. And then all of a sudden, you go into a COVID situation where most of us in minor league baseball, our staffs got cut from, at least us here in Durham, our staff got cut from low 40s down to 18. And then you're trying to build that back up. And then, oh, by the way, the whole restructuring of minor league baseball, trying to figure out how that all worked through that situation. So yeah, it's been an interesting run, but at the end of the day, you're working at a ballpark. What can be that miserable that you come into a ballpark every day, and anytime you're stressed, you go out and walk around the warning track. It's funny because we have TVs all around our office, and our staff sees me walking around the warning track. They're like, "Oh, Mike's getting stressed, and he needs to go do one of his walks around the warning track." But every single time you can come out and talk to our fans and just see the moments from the young kid to the 70, 80-year-old that's been coming here forever. That's what makes this so much fun. That's why I've had opportunities to go elsewhere outside of minor league baseball, but I do feel like I am a minor league baseball lifer, because you have that connection with fans that you just don't have in most sports.
And going back to coming to Durham, you said that you're with your hometown team, the GM. That was pretty much only if Durham called that you'd go to Durham. What was it, even from your Wisconsin perspective, that made Durham such an appealing location?
Well, I think it was at that time in the late 90s, only 10 years removed from the movie.
Yeah. So
everybody knew about the Durham Bulls. And so for me, that's probably the only thing that would pull me away, was just being able to go from a single A to a triple A. If the Bulls were still single A at that time, I don't know if I would have done it. But I really like challenges. I'm a very competitive person, and to be able to say, oh wow, I can go and be the youngest assistant GM in AAA at the time, and I'm just so thankful for the people like Ken Stockey and some of the people in the International League that really took me under their wing when I first got here, because I was this cocky young guy coming into AAA thinking I knew everything, and there were so many people. Randy Mobley, you can go on and on with some of these legendary guys, Mike Tamburo, Lou Schweckheimer, all these guys that were in the International League really took me under their wing and helped me kind of learn the ropes of AAA, because it is different, and especially the Durham Bulls. When you're in charge of the Durham Bulls, that's a different kind of world versus any other minor league team. We have a standard that's set that everybody looks at across that time 160 minor league teams. Everybody always looks to the Durham Bulls. What are they doing? So I've always taken great pride in that it's something that this iconic brand is something that we need to cherish, and I think we've been able to do that over the years despite all the ups and downs.
Yeah, because so now the movie Bull Durham, that brought the team into more prominence, is now not 10 years old, but 35, 36 years old. Still a big cultural reference, but not as not as big as it was then. But still, what you're talking about, the Durham Bulls kind of being the standard, the flagship minor league franchise, remains. And so, is that, you say you're a competitive person, is part of your job saying we're not going to lose this mantle to whoever it may be? We're going to be the most iconic minor league franchise?
Yes, that, without a doubt. And when you've been in minor league baseball for 31 years, you've developed a lot of relationships with different people. There's a lot of my good friends have been in minor league baseball a long time, and believe me, they try really hard to top the Durham Bulls. We have text threads all the time. Anytime somebody gets ahead of us in retail or gets ahead of us in something, I'm getting text messages. So even around the minor league baseball, that is the feeling that the Durham Bulls are, they're the pinnacle. And how do we operate? It's funny, so many different things that we've brought to this ballpark. If we do something, all of a sudden the amount of teams that follow, and I try to stress that with our employees over all these years, is you have to remember that's the decisions we make are not just being seen around the triangle. They're being seen all around minor league baseball, and we take great pride in that, and that is something that sure there's a lot of things that minor league baseball, heck, you know more than anybody, there's a lot of things that minor league teams will do that the Durham Bulls just won't do, because we feel we have a specific brand, and we don't have to do a lot of the things that minor league teams do in order to get the attention. Now we're kind of spoiled with that, but we take great pride in that, and every year for us to be in a 30-year-old ballpark and still be top 5 in attendance, that says something about the group of people that we've had working here over the last 26 years that I've been here.
Yeah, so organizationally, what is it that keeps that elite level happening? Ballpark's more than 30 years old. The movies itself is more than 30 years old. Things can't always be taken for granted. So when you do talk about the ballpark, the game day experience, the merchandise, the social media approach, I mean, how do you keep things firing on all cylinders to where you're maintaining?
Right. We have very high standards, and our mantra in our office is make it easy to be a Bulls fan. Every decision we make is how are we making it easy to be a Bulls fan. It's not our motto isn't make it easy to be an employee. It's not make it easy to be anything. It's make it easy to be a Bulls fan, and that's what drives all of our decisions. We're going to do things that we think our fans want, and we're going to always remain affordable. So even though we're in a larger market, we're 23rd, I think, in average ticket price. We're not jacking up our ticket prices. We're remaining very affordable for people to come out, enjoy themselves, whether it's with a company, whether it's with your family, friends. That's what it's all about. Jim Goodman, one of the first days I got hired, said, the success of a company is based on relationships, and we feel we have a relationship with every single one of our fans, and that needs to be our thought process in all the decisions we make. Sure, just like anybody else, you're in it to make some money, but that's not the driving factor. It's never been the driving factor for the Goodmans. We're always trying to be on the forefront. They do it with our TV stations, they do it with our real estate division. We want to be on the forefront of everything from technology to, we don't do a lot of things we don't do big giveaways. There's a lot. We're not going to change our name every few weeks. Those are certain things we're just not going to do, and I think that's a standard that we set and a competitiveness that we have, and we're just going to put on a good show every night for our fans.
Yeah, and then talking about Durham, the city of Durham and this larger area, we were talking about this earlier. There's been a lot of growth in this region at large, around the ballpark. The ownership group has had something to do with that growth. Yeah. But how is the area itself changing, affected how the franchise operates?
Well, so when I first got here, nobody would come to downtown Durham. This was a place. In fact, the American Tobacco across the street was used for SWAT practice. It was an empty tobacco warehouse. People from the Triangle, from Raleigh, Chapel Hill, they would come to Bulls games because they felt safe because it was right off the freeway, and then they would get back on and leave. And that's totally different now. We're everywhere you look, there's a new apartment complex being built right down here at the ballpark. So we've had this success without people living around the ballpark. Now we're just expecting over the next 5 to 10 years that as the growth continues to come down here to downtown Durham, it's only going to help our attendance even more.
Well, as we're talking, the Bulls just won the game, so seems like a good time to wrap it up, but you're now past your 30th year anniversary in the game. We were talking earlier, and you said, 40, I can't see 40. But never say never. I mean, how do you see yourself, progressing from here?
Well, so that's the hardest part, because when I'm not here, I'm always thinking about here. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's just the way it works in this business. Is we're so passionate about what we do, and so for me, I'm not going anywhere besides the Bulls. If whether that's 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. Whatever it is, I do fully expect my full career to be here in minor league baseball because I just love it so much. There's never a dull day. We've graduated so many employees from the Bulls. We have, some of them are in the NBA. Some of them, heck, Gillian Zucker, who I replaced, is the president of the LA Clippers. We have a president of a NASCAR track. That's what I love. Yeah. I love being able to bring some of these. Now at my age now, it's bringing in some of these kids, seeing them grow here, and then going off and doing some incredible things. That doesn't happen in other industries. Minor league baseball, I can't tell you how many people call me up from major league organizations that say, we want to hire minor league people because they get it. They understand the work ethic that's needed. And so I am a minor league baseball lifer, and I've loved everything about my 31 years.
Well, I hope this lifer interview was not too painful, but glad we did it. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Mike.
It's Odyssey's AI Minute, presented by Oracle. We all know what it's like to feel harried, but you definitely don't want your doctor rushing. AI technology, like Clinical Digital Assistant from Oracle Health, might be a solution. The new center at Stanford Medicine reports that AI can accurately listen and record clinical notes. 2/3 of physicians said it helped to save time. This means more time for clinicians to be present with their patients. AI may be the most important new computer technology ever, but AI needs a lot of processing speed, and that gets expensive fast. Upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is the single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. Do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic. Take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/AI-biz. oracle.com/AI-biz.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you another thrilling edition of Ghosts of the Miners. Now, here's your correspondent and host, Joshua Jackson.
Welcome back to Ghosts of the Miners, in which all of you out there in Radio Land must identify the legitimate historical ball club or player hiding amidst the fraudulent pair. One once competed for all the marbles. The others never even got in the game. In the last segment, I asked you which of the following minor league baseball teams did at one time exist. A, the Fort Washington Georges. B, the Monroe Jimbos. C, the Lincoln Abes. You know your ABCs if you picked Z, the Lincoln ABEs, who stood tall from 1910 until the middle of 1914. The Lincoln Abes represented is in the land of Lincoln. It's Lincoln, Illinois. Lincoln, Illinois! The land of Lincoln! And the Abes were linked up in the Illinois-Missouri League for the duration of the Lincoln administration as a ball club. Lincoln logged a lot of memories in the Illinois-Missouri League, and Lincoln logged a lot of managers in the Illinois-Missouri League of 1911 alone, going through 5 skippers just to finish 5th out of 6 with a 59-64 record. Believe it or not, it's the honest truth that the Abes were even worse the previous season, their inaugural campaign, when they were 43-71. But by 1912, the Lincoln Abes had addressed all disunity and hardship those previous seasons, riding an unbelievable performance by Paulie Wolf, who played in a game for the Chicago White Sox that year and 4 more 2 years later, all the way to the league title. As good as those Abes were, and they were often good enough to score many runs in one game, sometimes good enough to do more than 4 score, they could only do so much to hold the Illinois-Missouri League together. And in 1913, it was very much a circuit divided against itself. 2 teams dropped out of the league mid-season, and after Lincoln won the first half championship and tied the Champaign Velvets for the second half championship, with both clubs going 21-11 in that stretch, the Velvets tried to pull a smooth move by refusing to play a 1-game playoff against Lincoln to determine whether they'd have a shot against the first half champion, that is, Lincoln, in the finals. Lincoln therefore won long, and at season's end, even the Champaign Daily News admitted, Lincoln led in every department of the game, save fielding. Into July 3rd of the 1914 season, the Abes were still playing impressive ball, 32-15, when the rival Kankakee Kanks kicked the bucket. As good as the Abes were on the field, Lincoln had apparently not been doing so well for the people, of the people, or by the people at the box office. Per the Streeter, Illinois Free Press, Lincoln was evidently looking for an excuse to drop out, and the team joined the Kanks in quitting. The next year, the whole league was done before opening day. And that's how the Lincoln Abes perished from the earth. Now, on to the question for next time. Which of these players had a classic act in the minors of yesteryear? A. Dante Hanks. B. Ovid Nicholson. C. Socrates Cruise. Want to know the answer? Get a book. Or tune for the next Ghost of the Miners. But for now, you'll have to excuse me. My producer Ben Hill is trying to catch a fish with a radio, and I've got to find his tuner.
Well, huge thanks to Benjamin Hill, to Mike Birling, the team president of the Durham Bulls, to Josh Jackson for swinging by with Ghost of the Miners on this week's episode of the Show Before the Show. And before we get out of here, it's time for another edition of Name That Dude. And this week, Sam has the dude, and I will be the dude guesser. Sam, take it away.
All right. So this week's dude was drafted twice. First by the Atlanta Braves in the 9th round of the 1983 draft. So we're throwing it back a little bit.
Even before my birthday.
Even before your birthday. Did not sign with the Braves in 1983. Was taken in the 2nd round by the Pittsburgh Pirates out of McClellan Community College in Waco, Texas, and did sign with the Pirates in 1984. Played for the Pirates, or in the Pirate system for just one season. Played for Watertown in the New York Penn League, the Watertown Pirates in 1984. Played 65 games, so that's a little bit of a hint there. Batted .323 with a .964 OPS.
Jeez.
Shortly after that was traded to the Yankees and debuted in their system in 1985, playing for Fort Lauderdale. In 1985, 117 games of the Fort Lauderdale Yankees, .296 average, 11 homers, 10 triples, 18 doubles, .861 OPS the entire season in the Florida State League in 1985. Goes back to the FSL in 1986. Only plays 36 games. I didn't research this. There's probably an injury involved here somewhere. But batted .302 with a .900 OPS in those 36 games. 1987 goes straight to Columbus. Plays for the Columbus Clippers in 1987, 134 games. That's .279, 31 homers. So easily his best power season, .865 OPS, and he debuts for the Yankees in 1987. Goes back to Columbus and the major leagues in 1988 with the Yankees. Not great time with the Yankees in 88. Bats .188, and then is traded to another team, who I'm not going to say because this will give it away. But I will tell you who he played for in 1989. He played for, in the Pacific Coast League, the Calgary Cannons for 56 games, and then played for the Calgary Cannons again for 13 games in 1990. He spent the remainder of his career with this one organization. So he debuted in the majors with the Yankees, then played the rest of his career for this one organization, played all the way to 2001. So 15 years in the major leagues, finished with 310 homers. Made one All-Star game and won a Gold Glove.
I do have one guess, especially given how you said, if I name this other organization, you're going to know it, because there is a tie-in to, is it a guy who Frank Costanza yelled at George Steinbrenner about in an episode of Seinfeld?
That is correct.
Is it Jay Buhner?
It is Jay Buhner.
What the hell did you trade Jay Buhner for? And a rocket for an arm? You don't know what the hell you're doing.
If I said this guy was traded from the Yankees to the Mariners,
you know what's interesting?
Spent the rest of his career with the Mariners.
When you first started talking about him, I was like, okay, obviously a position player guy, a guy who's got some pop. But I thought to myself, like, oh, I think that's too early to be Jay Buhner. His first draft year was 83, huh?
Yeah. He was drafted out of community college.
Jay Buhner. Okay, let me look him up. Wow, Jay Buhner was born in 1964. He is 60 years old. And it was his birthday. Yeah. It was his birthday on Tuesday. Happy birthday, Jay Buhner. Man, I never in my life would I have guessed that Jay Buhner was already 60 years old. Man.
I had no idea about the Pirates thing.
I didn't either.
The reason why I bring up Jay Buhner, Tyler, is because today, August 15th, the day we were recording this, 2024.
Yes.
It is the 25th anniversary of my first Major League Baseball game.
Wow.
The Seattle Mariners played the Boston Red Sox.
That's awesome.
At Fenway Park 25 years ago
15th,
today.
1999.
Yes. The Mariners won 4-3. Jay Buhner was in that game along with Ken Griffey Jr. Alex Rodriguez homered. He hit his 31st home run of the season. Jay Buhner had a sac fly that day. He went over 3 with an RBI and 2 strikeouts.
He was starting to kind of tail off at that point in his career.
A little bit, yeah.
He'd been dealing
Griffey
with
went
injuries.
1 for 4, didn't strike out. But yeah, I just woke up this morning and realized it's August 15th. And, first thing I think, like, is this my cousin Kate's birthday today. Happy birthday to Kate.
Happy
and
birthday, Kate.
I always remember our first game that we got tickets for, which was for my birthday in April. My aunt Kathy got me tickets. I remember thinking like, oh, that's really neat. And my mom's like, well, it's on Kate's birthday. I'm like, but we got tickets to the Red Sox game. What are you talking about? And we sat along the first base line, not like seat level. We were several rows back. But I would play Ken Griffey Jr. Slugfest on Nintendo 64.
Yes.
And I would do that matchup of Red Sox versus Mariners like every day that summer. And anytime anybody hit a foul ball at the first base line, I would call over my dad and like, see, it's possible. It could happen. We could get a foul ball. And other things I did a Twitter thread about this earlier, but like some other things I remember is I walked in and you could see like the green monster through a sliver.
Yeah.
Just like the opening, and I tripped over a ramp because I was just staring
You're
at
like
it.
mesmerized by it.
There it is. It actually
like when
exists.
Billy Crystal tells the story of his first time at Yankee Stadium and how green the grass was, something that you would never expect, like a shade that you had never seen in real life. And you're like, what is this? This is magic.
And then we walked past, unbeknownst to us. I mean, Fenway Park is obviously old, and a lot of it was built at a time where fans' access to players was not a big deal. But like the clubhouse door is fairly easy to see.
Yeah.
And it was just open, and Brian Daubach was there.
Wow.
And he was just like talking to a Red Sox employee or like a stadium attendant or something. And I just saw Brian Daubach, and I'm like, that's the closest I've ever been to a Major League Baseball. Like, he's just right there. And this is the time of the season. Brian Daubach was hitting 341 at the time. This is not like some schlub. He was pretty good for the Red Sox then. And I just like yanking on my mom, like, Brian Daubach's right there. And she's like, we can't do anything about that. That's nice, but like that's nothing we can do. And like I said, A-Rod homered. I don't remember that, although I'm sure I saw it and was probably upset being a Sox fan at the time. But I remember the 9th inning so clearly.
Yeah.
Like they were down 4-3. Jose Mesa was the closer for the Mariners at the time.
Joe Table.
There you go. Mike Stanley came in as a pinch hitter. He reached, but Mike Stanley was slow, so they brought in Darren Lewis off the bench to be the pinch runner.
Man.
He stole second base to put the game-tying run in scoring position, and we were starting to leave because, being from Western Mass, we weren't used to driving into Boston, or at least my dad wasn't, and he was like, I don't want to get stuck in traffic for 3 hours going home. So we're like making moves, and I'm like, but no, Darren Lewis is on second base. And as we're like right approaching the exit, Trot Nixon struck out, and the game was over. So at least we got to see the whole thing. But it's just a memory I carry with me because I'm grateful I got the opportunity that my Aunt Kathy got me tickets.
That's
but also,
awesome.
We go to ball games all the time, right? And
yeah,
the maxim is somebody here is seeing their first game.
Yeah,
whether it's a minor league game, whether it's a major league game, some kid, whether it's a 9-year-old, whether it's a 15-year-old, whether it's a 4-year-old, is watching that and thinking like the same thoughts I had then. And you don't know what's going to become of that kid. Maybe they'll be a player, maybe they'll be a writer, maybe they'll do their own podcast or whatever podcast will exist when they're in their mid-30s. But that was a special day. And
that is very cool.
Jay Buhner was there, so he's our dude this week.
That is very cool. Two things that I want to touch on from that story. Jose Mesa, to me, this is still the funniest beef in baseball history. But Jose Mesa was not a fan of his former Cleveland teammate Omar Vizquel, because Omar Vizquel, in an autobiography, said that the 1997 World Series was basically blown because Jose Mesa was like too scared to pitch against the Marlins and try to close out the World Series in Game 7. And Jose Mesa never forgave Omar Vizquel for that, to the point that every single time they faced each other, Jose Mesa would drill Omar Vizquel, which was just like the most harmless, funniest thing to me. And I remember Jose Mesa was a member of the Colorado Rockies, and they were in the same division at that point. Omar Vizquel was pretty late in his career and was, a guy who Omar Vizquel was a very perfectly 90s player, and that like you remember thinking, oh, this dude is incredible. He is amazing. And then like you look at his numbers now and you're like, yeah, he was a very good player. Like Omar Vizquel's career OPS was 688. And like OPS plus, he never had like a single back-to-back season over major league average, over 100. So he was a very good 90s player, but Jose Mesa just never forgave him. And in the late stages of their careers, they were both in the National League West in 2006, and Jose Mesa would just drill. Like, no matter the game situation, Mesa pitching for the Rockies, Vizquel playing for the Giants, Jose Mesa would just drill Omar Vizquel. And it was the dumbest, funniest beef ever. And anyway, that was one thread. The other thread, man, if you look at Jay Buhner's 95 through 97 seasons, I just want to read off some of these numbers. 1995, he finished fifth in the MVP voting. That season, he slashed 262, 343, 566, and it was arguably his worst season of the three. The following year, 1996. Oh, that year, by the way, he hit 40 home runs and drove in 121. The following year, in 1996, an all-star for the only time in his career, also won a Gold Glove, and he finished in the top 20 in MVP voting. He slashed 271, 369, 557 for a 926 OPS, 44 homers, and 138 driven in. And then in 1997, he played one shy of a career high, 157 games. He had played 158 in 1993. But he put together a run of a slash line that was once again close to 900, 243, 383, 506, 40 home runs, 109 RBIs. And from 95 through 97, his total home run and RBI totals were 124 and 368, and his OPS was 908 for an OPS plus of 132. Like, you look back at those mid to late 90s Mariners teams, and obviously the conversation is most often around Junior and a little bit about A-Rod, but Jay Buhner, he was a force for those stretches in the mid 90s. And yeah, there was a lot of fun baseball played in Seattle at that time and on through the 2001 season, which weirdly enough, the 2001 team, which won 116 games, Jay Buhner only played 19 games for that team that year, and that was his final year in the big leagues. But man, he was a fun player, Jay Buhner. And now,
you talk about that 95 to 97 stretch, Tyler, real quick.
Yeah,
he was third in the majors in homers in that stretch. He had more homers than Junior. He played more games than Junior, but Mark McGwire had the most at 149. Albert Bell was second at 128, and Jay Buhner was third at 124. So more than Andres Galarraga, more than Mo Vaughn, Juan Gonzalez, Rafael Palmeiro, Frank Thomas, more than Barry Bonds over the same stretch. And Bonds had played more games than Jay Buhner. So yeah, it's fun to remember that stretch of his career for sure.
Jay Buhner, another very perfectly 90s player, like the shaved head, the big bushy goatee. You know, he always had pine tar on his uniform.
Yeah, the thing I always go back to, which is extremely telling, was when Junior had his number retired, I think, by the Mariners, and he had Jay Buhner there. It was like on the field with his family.
Yeah,
and the touching moment that they had, and I think Junior said something like, "If something were ever to happen to me, you are the person I would want to take care of my family." And you can just see Jay Buhner like turn into a puddle, and he's got that kind of, he's huge. He's got the bald head, like you said, the goatee. If you were to meet him on the street, you would think he would be gruff, but it seems like he's a guy who just like cared.
The sweetest guy ever.
Yeah.
I also did not know this, and I have no idea if this is true. But according to Jay Buhner's Wikipedia, he is the namesake of Korean American K-pop idol Jay Park from the group Hyphen. If you're a dude who's like riding to glory as a musician and you're like, you know who I got to get Jay Buhner's name back in the zeitgeist. I'm taking Jay on as the star. That's pretty cool. I also assume they're called Hyphen. If they got a band member named after a Mariner, I would imagine Hyphen is named after our friend Ryan Roland Smith, the Hyphen himself. I would think. Has to be.
Of course. Yeah. I don't see why not. I mean, they're probably doing the same thing in Korea that we are doing right now. Just like, you remember Jay Buhner?
They're doing remember some guys, and they do some KBO dudes, but they also do like, remember Jay Buhner? Remember that guy? All right, Sam. This is a fun episode, this week's episode of the show before the show. When is it not a fun episode? Get in touch with us, podcast at MILB.com. Send us your thoughts on, where your team's prospects are after the re-ranks and all of that. And that'll do it for this week's episode. Huge thanks to Benjamin Hill, to Mike Birling, obviously, for his conversation with Ben, to Josh Jackson for swinging by with Ghost. And for Sam Dykstra, my name is Tyler Mon. We'll catch you next week.